Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. I am back from bereavement, losing my mother, so I was gone that week. I am back now. Thank you for sticking with me. This is part 2 of the Satanic Spirit, Annihilation of Palestine and Ukraine. This is part 2 of Ukraine portion. And I'm going to share some stories with you on that. First story. This one is actually a part I forgot to give you in part 1 with the Middle East, with Israel. It's another portion of what's happening to my church over there. So let me just add that really quickly. Middle East Council of Churches condemns Israel's freezing of church bank accounts. This was out August 22nd. The Middle East Council of Churches has issued a strong condemnation of Israeli authorities' decision to freeze the bank accounts of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem, along with imposing heavy taxes on church properties. In a statement titled "Regarding the Occupation Authorities' Freezing of the Bank Accounts of the Orthodox Patriarchate in Jerusalem, imposing heavy taxes on its properties and assaulting some of its properties," the Council describes the action as an assault on its parishioners and on the people of Palestine as a whole. The Council states that the freezing of accounts paralyzes the ability of church institutions to function normally and serve the people and prevents aid from reaching them at a time when they are most in need of it. The statement notes that this phase of financial pressure comes after decades of direct attacks on and confiscation of patriarchal property in more than one location in Palestine, with the target being the Christian presence and the Palestinian presence in general on the land of Palestine, the land of the incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, and the launching of the message of salvation. The Council, which has been working for justice and peace since its founding half a century ago, calls on the international community and ecumenical bodies to demand the implementation of international agreements in respect for international humanitarian law, and to exert the necessary pressure to dissuade the occupying forces from carrying out these aggressive and destructive actions. No matter what you think of the World Council of Churches, they're speaking out about this important issue. The Middle East Council of Churches includes the Orthodox churches of Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria, and Cyprus, as well as Oriental, Catholic, and Protestant churches. And he just reiterates what was just said. So, statements issued by the Middle East Council of Churches regarding the occupation authorities' freezing of the bank accounts of the Orthodox Patriarchate in Jerusalem, imposing heavy taxes on its properties, and assaulting some of its properties. The Middle East Council of Churches, which includes the Blessed Greek Orthodox Jerusalem Patriarchate as a founding member, and a fundamental element of its structure, strongly condemns the suffering of this Patriarchate, which has been enduring for decades from the violations and injustice of the occupation against its people and institutions. The freezing of the bank accounts of the Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem by these authorities constitutes an assault on its parishioners and on the people of Palestine as a whole. This action paralyzes the ability of church institutions to function normally and to serve the people, and prevents aid from reaching them at a time when they are most in need of it, given the inhumane conditions endured by the Palestinian people, resulting from the ongoing war against them. All this is happening while the Palestinian people in Gaza are subjected to genocide and territorial destruction, inevitably leading to ethnic cleansing. In the West Bank, the Palestinian people are subjected to daily attacks by settlers, with the aim of displacing people and achieving transfer, which would lead to the elimination of the Palestinian presence. and the denial of their right to their land despite the recognition of this right by the United Nations and international conventions. The Middle East Council of Churches, which has been preaching and working for justice and peace since its founding half a century ago, and which calls for a just solution to the Palestinian cause. Calls on the international community, especially the world's most influential ecumenical bodies, to demand the implementation of international agreements and respect for international humanitarian law, and to exert the necessary pressure to dissuade the occupying forces from carrying out these aggressive and destructive actions. This phase of financial pressure comes after decades of direct attacks on and confiscation of patriarchal property in more than one location in Palestine. The two processes are inevitably linked, with the target being the Christian presence and the Palestinian presence in general on the land of Palestine, the land of the incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection, and the launching of the message of salvation. The Middle East Council of Churches believes that the entire world must stand together to save humanity and the remaining Christians on the land of Christ. Beirut, August 20. Okay, yeah. So, as you can see, this is kind of still part of part one. I forgot this, but as you see, they're doing this so that the church cannot help the Gazans in need. Okay, because obviously there is a St. Porphyrius Church is in Gaza, and God protect them. And they are trying to help, and there's the Catholic Church in there too that's trying to help. In Gaza, they're trying to take the Izzies are trying to take away any support, aid of any kind to eradicate, as you just heard, all the non-Jays there. That's that. Now we're going to go on to Ukraine. This is a very disturbing story. State employees found desecrating Kiev caves relics. This is unconscionable and very disturbing and shocking to us Orthodox Christians, and perhaps to you all who understand sacredness, sacred and holy things. Okay? Employees of the Ukrainian state's Kiev Caves Lavra Museum and Preserve have been photographed and videotaped desecrating relics that have been treasured in the caves for hundreds of years. On August 19th, the Telegram channel Fortress Lavra published materials showing museum staff removing reliquaries from the caves and handling them outdoors. The reliquaries with the relics of the saints have been brought out into the street. Preserve workers are performing some kind of manipulations with them. They're reaching inside with their hands, drawing something out. This is a savage, horrifying, and contemptuous for our saints, they said. The Union of Orthodox Journalists described museum staff in plain clothes bringing reliquaries into garden areas with empty reliquaries and cleaning solutions. Photographed near the cave entrances, items, possibly vestments, or other sacred objects were hung on nearby fences. Lord have mercy. As you realize, I have not read the whole thing of this. I only skimmed over to the beginning, and this is horrifying. It's so sacrilegious. It's so just monstrous. The monastery's brotherhood hasn't had access to the relics since March of this year. Previously, monks would annually perform a reverent reclothing of the saints' remains with prayers. That month, a government commission arrived to inspect, quote-unquote, the relics. The commission cut locks to access the near and far caves, which house the incorrupt relics of more than 120 saints. The monastery's lawyer, Archpriest Nikita Chekman, said that the monks refused to participate in the commission's work, calling it blasphemous, it is, to inspect relics as cultural values. He noted the commission included various scientists and medical professionals, including anatomists, histologists, embryologists, and in particular a doctor of veterinary sciences. Lord have mercy. The Ministry of Culture created the commission on March 5th, tasking it with checking the presence of the remains of saints in the tombs and determining the historical and significant value of the remains. It was also reported that DNA testing is planned. Why? They don't believe those are the saints, or you could see who they are. Oh my gosh. This is so disturbing to me. This has got to stop. Got to stop all this. Now, let me just give you what Metropolitan Luke denounces satanic desecration of Kiev caves relics. His Eminence, Metropolitan Luke of Zaporozhye, of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, has issued a strong condemnation of the Ukrainian government's handling of holy relics at the Kiev Caves Lavra, calling the recent actions of state museum employees Satanism and demonic mockery of the shrine. In a statement addressing the situation where museum workers were photographed removing and mishandling reliquaries containing saints' relics outdoors and piling them haphazardly in a storage room under the stairs, Metropolitan Luke accuses the authorities of hypocrisy, noting that while the Bolsheviks at least honestly declared, "We are godless," and openly waged war against the church, the current officials cover themselves with words about faith in God, portray themselves as believers, but in reality act worse than their ideological teachers because they are hypocritical and try to legalize sacrilege. The Metropolitan directly challenges claims by the Preserve's director that they are creating something new for the good of the country, stating, "Can blasphemy have creative power? No. Everything built on the trampling of shrines inevitably collapses." He particularly criticizes the museum leadership's characterization of their work as representing the intersection of spirituality, culture, and innovations. Good Lord, innovations? Arguing that where the relics of God's saints are desecrated, the light of Christ is being covered with an alien, demonic, so-called spirituality. Oh my God. Metropolitan Luke also addresses reports that authorities are preparing UNESCO documentation to register the first service by Epifani Dumenko, the head of the schismatic structure, in the caves near the relics as unintangible cultural heritage. He warns that while in earthly archives they will be called creators in the heavenly books, they are blasphemers and betrayers of Christ. The Metropolitan concludes with a reminder that God is not mocked and that current events represent a test of faith for the Church's children, calling them to more firmly confess Christ as our fathers did in times of persecution. This is what the Metropolitan's his whole statement. Christ is in our midst, my dear readers. Innovations of hell in the heart of the Lavra. I know, it's just horrible. Modern non-Christians call this creation, innovations, and spirituality, but in reality, blasphemy is being committed with the relics of the venerable Kiev Cave saints of God. The Bolsheviks at least honestly declared, "We are godless," and openly waged war against the church. They destroyed churches and treated holy things with contempt, not hiding their hatred of Christ, but the current wicked ones cover themselves with words about faith in God, portraying themselves as believers, but in reality act worse than their ideological teachers because they are hypocritical and try to legalize sacrilege. In her latest interview, the director of the Preserve states that they are building something new for the good of the country, but can blasphemy have creative power? No. Everything built on the trampling of holy things inevitably collapses. You cannot erect a temple of new life upon the bones of saints. You'll only get a whitewashed sepulchre wrapped in words about development, which appears beautiful on the outside, but inside is full of all manner of filth. She speaks of the intersection of spirituality, culture, and innovations in the Lavra. Where is the spirituality here? True spirituality can only be from God. But where the relics of God's saints are desecrated, The light of Christ is being covered with an alien, demonic, so-called spirituality which destroys everyone and everything. And innovations, this is not culture, but pure Satanism. Blasphemous mockery of holy things covered with a mask of modernity. Moreover, the director proudly declares about spiritual support from the new inhabitants of the Lavra. But where are these supporters? Why are they not with the relics? Where is prayer, tears of repentance, at least a shadow of reverence? Their support is silent consent to abomination. This is not spiritual help, but complicity in darkness. The fruits of such spirituality are outright demonism, clothed in a cassock, covered with pious words. Now they're preparing documents from UNESCO to register Domenko's first service in the caves near the relics as intangible cultural heritage, a unique event in the country's history. They want to immortalize this in earthly history. But in God's history, it's already been eternally recorded quite differently as the abomination of desolation and demonic desecration of what is holy. In earthly archives, they'll be called builders, but in the heavenly books, blasphemers and betrayers of Christ. Holiness can't be abolished, can't be rewritten in documents, can't be hidden under stairs or in storage. The relics of the saints are the living grace of God. The Lord said, God is not mocked. Any attempt to mock the church, its saints and relics will turn into judgment, first of all, upon those who dare to raise their hand against the holy things. Today's events are a test of our faith, for us children of the church not to be frightened, but to more firmly confess Christ as our fathers did in times of persecution. And for those who desecrate the holy things, this is already testimony against them for the day of God's judgment, which no one will escape. And if it seems that what is holy is being trampled upon, remember, God is long-suffering, but he doesn't permit evil indefinitely. Judgment will come, and then it will be revealed that building upon sacrilege creates not a temple, but a pagan altar. Spirituality without Christ isn't light, but darkness. Innovations against God aren't progress, but eternal perdition. Those who attempt to immortalize this in earthly history are already eternally inscribed in God's history as blasphemers and Satanists. Yeah. God is not going to let this continue. Elder Epideios said, the saints won't allow this to go on with Russia. God won't allow this, and the saints won't allow this to go on between Russia and Ukraine. God will not allow this to happen at this time, But in any case, I'm going to give you some information again on that by where is it? I don't think I brought it up. Well, actually, it might be in here. Okay, this is what and here he is talking about Jabalatin Luke way back here in 2023 when this article was written about the monks in Ukraine, what's going to happen. But he's already given stern words of warning. There are indeed even prophecies linked with this historic occasion, such as this prophecy from St. Lawrence of Cherenkov. So this is what St. Lawrence has said. Now, you probably heard this before. I've said it several times. We're going to do it again to reiterate this because of what just happened. When a little freedom appears, when the churches and monasteries are being opened and restored, then all false teachings will come out, and the demons and secret atheists, he says Catholics, Uniats, Ukrainians, self-ordained, that's the schematics, and others, and will fiercely take up arms against the Orthodox Russian Church, its unity and its conciliar nature. A godless authority will support these heretics, and therefore they will take churches away from the Orthodox and slaughter the faithful. Then the Metropolitan of Kiev, that's Domenko pretending to be the Metropolitan, not worthy of the name, together with his like-minded hierarchs and priests, will strongly shake the Russian church. The whole world will be amazed at his lawlessness and will be frightened. He himself will go off into eternal perdition like Judas. As Metropolitan Luke just practically said, he basically said that in his message right there. But all these slanders of the evil one and false teachings will disappear in Russia, and there will be one Orthodox Russian church. Now, on that, I'm going to go back to the thing about the monks in the monastery, and I can't pronounce that monastery name. But this is back into, let's see. They also reported that this person, previously Minister of Defense of Donetsk People's Republic, also claimed in late 2022 that in 2014, this is when it was said, while he was minister, monks from that monastery approached him bearing this prophecy half a year after the heretics take over the Kiev Lavra and the caves. Russia will reunite with Ukraine as it was before, and Kiev will be liberated not just from the heretics but also all outside forces. May it be so. May it be so. God help them. So, that's important things right there. And I'm going to add two other stories regarding how this all came together, with the Ukraine-Russia thing. That the U.S. is always involved in, as well as NATO, UK, NATO. I'm going to go to this clip of Alex Craner and what he says here after the question.
One of the main issues, Alex, in Ukraine is the security guarantees. The Russian part, the Western part is just talking about it, considering it. When it comes to the West, I'm talking about Europeans mostly, they think of Ukraine having some sort of deterrence and some sort of power to defend itself, which we know it would be the same policy that brought Ukraine to this sort of collapse and destruction. You know, they made Ukraine the way with since 2014 up until 2022. They made an army of 700 forces ready, prepared by NATO to fight. That gave Ukrainians some sort of delusional aspect that they can fight Russia, they can do something to Russia. I have never believed that on the part of the West, they thought that Ukraine would defeat Russia, but they wanted to trap Russia in Ukraine. That's why but on the part of Ukrainians, I think they were somehow delusional that they can do something with that. And with this new policy of giving Ukraine some sort of power to defend itself, it's the same policy. You want to militarize Ukraine. On the other hand, Russia wants to demilitarize Ukraine. This is the problem, I think, that they're facing in the negotiations.
Yes, well, these are very, very relevant questions, but they're also full of nuance that, makes it, we have to be careful how we interpret it. I think that, the West set up their own government in Ukraine, which was not democratic, in 2014, right? It was a military junta. And the whole point of it was to draw Russia into a trap, into a quagmire that would weaken Russia, that would enable the West to destabilize Russia and bring about a regime change. So from that point of view, they didn't need Ukraine to win anything, and they didn't care what happens to Ukraine or how many Ukrainians they sacrifice in the process. They just wanted to weaken and destabilize Russia. That was the purpose. And then, if there were delusional people in Ukraine who thought that they could defeat Russia, I think their numbers were very, very small. And I think that what happened is that, you put certain loyal people in positions of power, and you give them incentives to push the whole society in that direction. And I learned this on your dialogue works, Nima. You had Colonel Jacques Beau, who told us about the polls in Ukraine. I think they were run maybe 2 weeks before the war actually broke out, and they were asking people in Ukraine, well, if Russians attack, would you defend the country with weapons? Would you stand up and defend the country against the Russians? And the huge majority of Ukrainians said no. They were not interested in that war, even at that late stage, already in 2022, which tells you that this at no point had anything to do with Ukrainian people. This had to do with certain structures of power that were set up by the Western powers, the United States and Britain and NATO countries, Poland and Germany included. And the objective of it was to subjugate Russia, to destroy it, to partition it, and to eliminate it as a political entity with any power on Eurasian landmass. Obviously, with the view of carrying forward, then the next stop was China. But to get to China, you needed to tame Russia first, and that was the whole role of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And the fact that they sacrificed 1.7 million Ukrainians, they don't care. They don't care at all. They never had it in mind to do anything good for Ukraine. And the preparations for this go back to 1991, from the time when Ukraine became an independent country, when the Soviet Union collapsed. Almost immediately NATO went in there. And then they started having military exercises together in 1995. And then in Madrid, they signed the treaty of distinctive partnership between NATO and Ukraine. And it just went on and on and on until the coup, when the cooperation and coordination and preparations went, full on.
Yeah, I'm sure he goes on, but we all want to remember how this started and the terrible tragedy that's happened in Ukraine. Let me add to that what he said. You heard, because people are like, oh, that's just propaganda. They didn't lose that many people. Russia did, or not Russia. Ukraine didn't lose that many people. We lost several generations. Ukrainian MP on leaked docs. Files accessed by hackers are said to show 1.7 million Ukrainian troops killed or missing since 2022. Ukrainian MP has admitted the loss of several generations in the country's 3-year conflict with Russia. In 3 years, 1.7 million. Good God. The comments from Artem Dmitruk follow reports that leaked military files indicate Kiev's forces have lost more than 1.7 million troops killed or missing since 2022. If they're missing, that usually doesn't mean they're alive. Russian media outlets on Wednesday cited a digital card index allegedly acquired by hacker groups from Ukraine's chief of staff, said to contain names of dead or missing soldiers, details of their deaths, and personal data of their families. The entries suggested 118,500 troops were killed or went missing in 2022, 405,400 in 2023, 595,000 in 2024, and a record 621,000 so far this year. Commenting the reported losses, he said the lists of the missing today contain more than 1 million people, and of course these people are most likely dead while their families remain in complete ignorance. The situation is tragic. The situation is frightening. He warned that villages had been emptied by men, including the elderly and disabled, and that Ukraine was facing huge losses and a demographic crisis. We have lost several generations, he said, urging peace on the grounds that both Ukrainians and Russians were dying. Reported figures far exceed official estimates. In February, Ukraine's Zelensky told CBS News that 46,000 of his soldiers had been killed since 2022. That was a big fat lie. Alongside about 380,000 wounded. Numbers questioned in Western media. Moscow has also claimed higher Ukrainian losses, putting the toll at more than 1 million killed or wounded as of early this year. So, and Russia has not lost as many. Okay, last time I heard it was around 400,000. And I got that from analysts such as Colonel McGregor, Scott Ritter, Colonel Wilkerson. Okay, so one last story, this tragedy. And again, none of this would have happened where, at least if we would quit meddling, but also Ukraine wouldn't have lost all these people if they had made that deal that they had signed initially a couple months after the special military operation started. They were ready to have peace. The Ukrainians would still be alive. A lot of them would still be alive, and they would have a good chunk of their land still. But no, as usual, UK, us, and others, no, they have to have their way, because that's our history. Blood on our hands everywhere. It's just terrible. Let me give you the last article. It's just really, that just came out today, that was just really another disgusting, blasphemous thing. Kiev tried to use scam victim as suicide bomber. FSB. A Russian woman was allegedly tricked into sending $37,000 to the Ukrainian security services before being dragged into a terror plot. Look at this. Put this in the frame of an holy icon. Can just the blasphemy, the just oh my gosh, terrible. Ukrainian operatives allegedly tricked a Russian woman into debt before attempting to use her in a suicide bomb plot. Russia's Federal Security Service said Monday. The woman, a 54-year-old resident of Volgograd region, was reportedly targeted by Ukraine's SBU, which initially posed as the Russian FSB. According to the investigators, she was told that a person with power of attorney over her affairs had taken out a loan in her name and donated part of the funds to the Ukrainian military, exposing her to possible treason charges. The woman was then given instructions on how to avoid consequences involving taking out more loans and transferring the money to accounts controlled by Kiev-linked scammers, leaving her about $37,000 in debt. Those scammers are horrible. Later, she agreed to act as a courier for people she believed were FSB officers. She traveled to Crimea, where she was handed a Christian icon with a hidden explosive device inside its frame. Investigators said she was told to bring it to an FSB office in Sevastopol. In an interview with Russian authorities, she said her handler had stayed in contact with her by video during the delivery. The plot was apparently foiled by security measures that blocked the woman from sending an encrypted message, which investigators said would have triggered an explosion and likely killed her along with people at the checkpoint. Russian officials have accused Ukrainian special services of using unwitting suicide bombers in several previous high-profile incidents, including the October 2022 Crimean bridge attack that killed the hired driver of a truck rigged with explosives. The February assassination of businessman Armen Sarkisyan in Moscow, and the May killing of city official Tsar Gurtsev in Stavropol. According to Moscow, Ukraine is increasingly resorting to terrorist attacks as its forces struggle on the battlefield. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This just makes me sick to my stomach that they did this. Just, how dare they put that near the Mother of God and Christ's? And I got that just never end. That just really bothers me to no end. No end. It bothers me. I can't even. This is so satanic. Okay, I know. People don't like to use words like that, but I want to be blunt. I want to be honest. I want to be right, straight, forthright when I speak, and that's what that is. mixing in explosives with a holy icon is demonic. And what's going on with the relics is demonic. It's of the evil one. So I shared all that. I hope you got something out of it, that you learned some stuff. And as I said, we'll see what happens. God willing, these prophecies will unfold and unfold and come to fruition, because this needs to end. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for following my channel. I hope you're having a great day, morning, evening. Until next time, God bless.